Selamat pagi semuanya. Good morning. Ohayo gozaimasu.
モーニング
Bapak-Ibu,
おはようございます。
ohayo Profesor.
Ohayou gozaimasu.
Ya baik, selamat pagi Bapak Ibu. Izin kami akan memulai acara karena waktu sudah menunjukkan pukul 9. We will now commence our agenda for today. Honorable Vice Rector of Human Resources and Assets of Universitas Indonesia, distinguished speakers and moderators, presenters, and all participants of the ICSCI conference. Good morning and welcome again on the second day of conference. We will have 4 keynote speakers today, and then later on we'll be proceeding with track session 2 after lunchtime. And our session today will be moderated by Dr. Kenny Lisher. He graduated from Universitas Indonesia for his under and postgraduate study. He graduated from Nara Institute of Science and Technology, Japan for his PhD, concentrating on bioscience. Dr. Kenny, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the times. Let me introduce myself. My name is Kenny Lisa. I come from University of Indonesia. So today, I got invited to become a moderator in this very prestigious events, the third international conference in smart city innovations, with collaborations with the 13th onset RCNE and also the and also sorry. And also the third international conference of dwelling farms. Today we already got the very interesting speakers, but before we move for the keynote speakers, we will have the welcoming speech from Professor Dedi here. The host, can you show the videos of welcoming speech from Professor Dedi?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from Depok, Indonesia. Honorable Governor of Bali, Bapak Dr. Iwayan Koster, Director General for Research and Development, Ministry of Research, National Board for Research and Innovation, Dr. Muhammad Dimyati, Rektor Universitas of Udayana, Ibu Profesor Ana Agung Raka Sudewi, our esteemed keynote and invited speakers, all participants and guests of the conference, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the third International Conference on Smart City Innovations virtually. We are very grateful to organize this conference alongside our two sister conference, namely the 13th Regional Conference on Energy Engineering, which is supported by our friend at AUN SIDNet, as well as the third International Conference on Dwelling Form from Department of Architecture, Universitas Indonesia. On behalf of the Rector of the Universitas Indonesia, we would like to extend our utmost gratitude and appreciation for the keynote speakers, invited speakers, sponsors, participants, and organizing committee who have put together such as engaging event. In Universitas Indonesia, we have the vision to be establishing Universitas Indonesia as an independent and superior university that is capable of resolving problems and challenges nationally and globally. As an elite university in Southeast Asia, based on the statement above, we are committed to participate for the nation and world development. The main theme of research and innovation is sustainable development. The big question is, how do we achieve sustainable development? Smart City Universitas Indonesia is our involving research and consultancy team operating below Universitas Indonesia. What was a project conducted by the Sustainable Higher Education Research Alliance, SHERA. This program funded by United States Agency for International Development, USAID, focusing on urban development and planning. Smart City Universitas Indonesia has continuously surpassed itself to be prominent research institution in Indonesia. ICSCI was one of the activity initiated by SCUI and was held for the first time back in 2017 in Bandung. Over the last 4 years, Smart City UI encourages individual research to use interdisciplinary approaches on their respective work, collaborate on a global scale, and create scientific and technological innovation as a response to facing urban challenges. These goals are correlating with the UI's roadmap as a research and innovation center. In 2020, Smart City was granted a legal status from Universitas Indonesia under UKKPM scheme. This status then enabled Smart City UI to be a consultancy service in the span of smart city research and implementation for further proliferate its message of interdisciplinary nature in assessing pressing urbans. As the head of collaboration, venture and digital at Universitas Indonesia, we are very much aware of the promises and the challenges of the smart city implementation in Indonesia and beyond. We believe that smart city is not merely a natural technological fix, but it is a work in progress. We believe this conference will provide a safe space for all critics, discussions, and debate to construct a viable strategy for the future of urbanizations. I sincerely hope you will enjoy today and next 2 days of debate and networking. Thank you for your participation. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for the welcoming speech from Professor Dedi. We'll move to our keynote sections, ladies and gentlemen. So as you know that electrification is very important for our daily life. Without electrification, we cannot meet with each other like today, right? We have like meetings in WebEx and we have a conference online. So if we want to make a conference online, we should make sure some things that very important. What is that? That is the electrifications. Without electrifications, our laptop will shut down, our battery will shut down, and we cannot hold our conference. So our topics today is about, the first one is about the electrifications. The keynote sections of the first sections will be held by Professor Hideaki Ogaki. Professor Hideaki Ogaki is a professor from Institute of Advanced Energy from Kyoto University. He was engaged with National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology till 2001 and was visiting researcher in Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, USA in 1994 until 1995 and Duke University in 1919 until 2000. So his interest of research is about the electron accelerators and quantum radiation such as free electron lasers and laser compound backscattering gamma rays. So Professor Hideaki Ogaki today will talk about the title Rural Electrifications and QOLs Lessons from the Southeast of Asia. Ogaki Sensei, the times is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and the nice opening speech. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. So the screen is okay. Actually, I cannot check by myself.
The screen is okay. It's fine.
Okay. And the voice is enough volume. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes. I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. check. We need to check first. Okay. As the very great introduction, I'd like to talk about it a little bit on our study on the rural electrification, and then the discuss about the social aspect of the electrification. Actually, so the first of all, very thank you for the organization. Conference organizer to the organize this kind of very critical term to so many great effort to holding this one. And then also they invite me to the speaking this one. So the work is some kind of the international collaboration between the Kyoto University and the Malaysia, and then the University Yangon, the Myanmar, and the ITC in Cambodia. Yep. So here's the content. First introduction and the study, and then analysis and conclusion. So this. And then let me start with some introduction. Most of you already know very well known about it in this first slide. But again, today, so many people are still not having the modern electricity or modern access to the energy. According to the UN, the more than almost 40% of the population cannot using to the clean energy for cooking. we are focused on the electricity or electrification, and especially on the rural to actually first interesting is what is happening and what is the good things. And then the what system, energy system is the most effective or something. Because in all most of the reporting paper or the policy, the first line is saying that so electrification gives the people a good QOL, quality of life. And then this here is run down. So listening to the some merit, we believe here. In addition to the something separately from the SDG or SDGs or maybe related to the, of course, some kind of the benefit to contribute to the SDGs as well. But also some papers or the report saying to the findings on the negative impact of the rural electrification. RE is not renewable energy. in this presentation, I this mean RE meaning the rural electrification. It is saying to it may threaten the local practice and the culture. So first modernization or so say in Southeast the content maybe the European was westernized. It may create the environmental or land right controversies. For instance, the PV system, the concentrated PV system may need to do some kind of the large land or something. And then in economy of very local community inside village, it may increasing the inequality, especially for the economic side. So actually we want to see how it happens, what it's going here. So this one is also the very famous view of the 2016 the electrification, national electrification rate. So this is percentage of the population. So Indonesia, here 84%. Now the 2019 is almost 100%. I believe it is at least in the World Bank database, very close to the 100%. But even here the high ratio, Indonesia have the big population, and that means still many people in the rural not having to the electrification. Or if we define to the electrification ratio to the off-grid, the number should be much more larger. But anyway, so according to this one is so now many countries almost 100%, but still the lower ratio we saw we are seeing in the Myanmar or Cambodia here. Okay, this the condition is good enough or not? Anyway, it's obvious we should do something much more. And then so the still have something we should do is we don't know not so much actually in the economic effect, income or productivity. But maybe you can easily imagine the very small PV system, 30 watt or something. The lighting or some charging the cell phone is the maximum to using? Is it increasing productivity? Actually. So the economic effect on the different the energy system may be or should be very big how to say contribution to generate the income or increasing the level of the living, and also the technology option and the application. This is the engineering field. So maybe most of the audience is working on the engineering field, not in the social. Let's go. Other institutional effectiveness, structure, or it deeply depends on the policy or something. And then it's not actually not so much clearly known study by the social effect, because it's highly contextual, and then it's very complex. It's not simple. when I start to this kind of the study, I'm really missing too. I'm still wondering how to treat to this problem. But okay, usually difficult to examine. We cannot test because we are targeting or we are doing with the people. Actually, we cannot examine or test or something. We just observe. So it's really difficult to see some effect clearly. And also we noticed that the information on the ASEAN is a little bit limited. Mostly in the international journal or some papers in Africa or India, but not so much on the ASEAN. So we are starting to the study on this issue. Currently, our object is the study on the impact on the different rural education schemes on QOL. And then our methodology is based on the before and after by interview data. And they're using the objective indicators and the subject QOL. There are different rural education schemes. This time, we are having to the village on the grid extension village and the solar home system installation village, and then the mini grid, hybrid mini grid, solar concentrate solar, and then someone calling me. Okay. The concentrate solar and then the diesel. This kind of hybrid system. 3 types. And then so talking about a little bit on the QOL. And then actually, I'm really surprised this conference having to the quality of life session. I'm sorry, I'm really busy to even this afternoon. I will have my class online, so I cannot join today so much on this conference. I'm really sorry. But back to the QOL. Most of people have heard about the QOL especially in the public health or the medical field, how the patient can be spend their days on the good quality in the daily life. So for that, to indicate the quality, they have they established they have some the indicator to evaluate the QOL, and then as we talked, the objective. This is the more commonly used, and then the subject indicators. They also have, so like self-reported QOL or satisfaction level, or self-reported health or something, some factors or domain. The QOL evaluation for QOL. sorry for the little bit small, but this is this table showing to that our the survey indicators. So QOL is the self-reported, and then satisfaction level of each questioner, and then the psychological, or to say mental well-being, or physical well-being, or social well-being, and economic. This is the indicators. I will briefly, very briefly show you. So this is actually we recently published that paper. And then our target is the not for the community level or the much more larger provincial. We are targeted or the our data is based on the household, individual houses, something like that. And then the village selection was done to the no, of course we want to see that before and after, so that the no verification and the similar economy or climate condition in ASEAN, and the community willingness to take part in the project. Of course, we need to talk directly to the villagers. And then the electrification scheme selection were based on the economic capacity project or some other. So because we don't have any money, some big money to install by ourselves, so we attach to the some project, installation project, and then the before that we went, and then after that we work to the villages here. And then we still keep contact with them and they're collecting the data. So the change time after the 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, how they change. That is also my big interest. How they are increasing or they accelerate to their cure level very positively or constant, or they saturate. Anyway, here is the survey site. In this report, we focus on the 1, 2, 3, 4 villages in Myanmar and Cambodia, and then the Malaysia, Borneo, Kalimantan, Sarawak area. So the 2 villages is the powered by grid. This is the national or the provincial, the Sarawak energy. Yep. And here a hybrid system, mini grid system is in Myanmar, where the Myanmar the government is keen to push for installation this kind of the system. And then the small system in Malaysia, a solar home system here. And then here is the kind of the result. So first is the self-reported the well-being or QOL. Here of course we expect some positive effect. And then here is the mostly for 1 year or the 15 months later of installation. As you see, the grid system may or slightly increasing to the median. And then the hybrid system or mini grid system is the largely jumper. This is the imitation. And then the whole solar home system is also the move to the positive side in here, so that we can see from this the observation the ruralification in any electric system can increasing to the QOL. they bring to the positive impact on the QOL. So this is actually we are asking them to the local people what about how much level your QOL, and then we are collecting the answer for the number. Also, the subjective index is like a time using, especially for the when they are alone, how they satisfy or not satisfied. The second one is the housing. Are you satisfied your housing? And the cooking and the personal safety. And then here is the sorry. The result is saying to the housing, and then the time usage for the alone time is the no change. We did not observe any positive or negative change before and after the verification. And then the cooking, and then the safety for the cooking level, as you may suppose it, only for the grid extension case, they are answering to the positive. So because perhaps mostly from the capacity of the power, only the grid extension, grid power can supporting to like a rice cooker or some other high load the appliances. And here is the safety level, the grid and the solar home system gave them to the positive effect. Well, actually, it is not largely changed in both cases. なんか下に行かないかな。よっこいしょ。Sorry. Time. And the psychological well-being here is the it's not so much big, but they slightly we saw some the positive effect, especially for the hybrid and the solar home system. And then the physical health, the only 1 year, we are a little bit ridiculous or something, but the data, well, their answer is slightly positive. We don't know why they answer to their physical well-being is the positive after electrification. It's a little bit more different. And then the social well-being is not actually we did not see not so much change like this. And then economic well-being is the actually it depends on the money to using for the electricity. So the electricity expense is down in the grid extension in case of the Sarawak, but it is going up to the Cambodia case. And then hybrid system, their electricity expenses is actually very largely jump up. And then the solar home system in the Malaysia is going down. So they are a little bit. So satisfaction or the impact on the electrification on the economy is actually depend on this kind of electricity expense up and down. It's a little bit simple. It's not simple. So conclusion is the above is the positive effect of electrification on QOL. So we can say, of course, the electrification can give them to some positive effect. And then the different QOL are positive or neutral. So it may be, of course, depend on the available or affordable power, or of course something something behind. No big change in the social well-being. And then we should say that this is the very short time, or 1 year or less than 2 years. And then now we are still tracking to the change. なんか知らんけど、下に行かない。Sorry. And then finally, I'd like to give the one word is the rural unification plan should have some clear purpose for the policy recommendation. And then the roadmap. Especially if government has some grid connection in their future plan. So most of you know that the solar home system have some lifetime. In shortest time, 1 or 3 years, in 5 years, maybe. Or much more case, it is really difficult to sustain. So should be would be the most cost effective in short time. So as we see, there's not so much big difference in the grid or the other concentrated system. So if the government is thinking to the very short time of the positive effects or benefit, it may be okay. But the long term is still having the big problem to the connectivity of or the expansion. The grid extension needs the suitable fee. Most of the users claim to them it is too expensive for them. And then their claim to it is unstable. So enough the power or the supply system is required if they are collecting the money, right? And the mini grid can having to the some special or additional public service on the solid light or the water pumping. So they're mostly even without connecting to the mini grid system, they are very positive. And then the problem is that the people doesn't know so much about the system, and then they have to upgrading or maintain. This is the lifetime problem. And grid system is the high investing cost, of course, and then we need the very strong policy to extend to the national grid. Mini grid system, the proper operation and maintenance is required. It's a little bit complex system. And then the problem is the connectivity of the national grid. So extension is the very big problem. Oh, still. Okay, and then maybe here I'd like to finally thank to all the participants, especially for the students from the Myanmar, Cambodia, and then the Malaysia, and some the company and the NGO. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the speech from Professor Hideaki Ogaki. Very beautiful speech. No problem, Sensei. Yeah. So we don't have a Q&A section actually for the keynote speakers. So we actually just only give the presentation time for all the speakers. So yeah, if there is any questions, probably you can ask the questions, not in this keynote speaker sections, probably in the another times outside of these sections.
Of course, the sending to the chat for personal
okay.
for private chat is okay. I will still in here.
Okay, Professor. Thank you. Okay, Professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As we know that electrification is very important, but after the efforts of the electrification in the rural areas, as already mentioned from Professor Hideaki, there is still challenge. Yeah, like from the grid extensions cost that's still very high, and also the unstable electricity powers that needs to be solved to make sure that the rural areas get the stable electricities. Okay, so now we move for the next keynote speakers. The next keynote speakers will be talk about something related with the spaces, something related with our lives, and something related with the pandemic of the COVID-19. But it's not about health, but it's about how the people's reclaiming the cities during the pandemic of the COVID-19. So our next speakers will be come from University of Florida, Professor Ruth Steiner. So she is a professor from departments of urban regional plannings at Smart and also Smart City Partners from the University of Florida from US. So she is a professor and director from Center for Health and Build the Environments from Department of Urbans and Regional Plannings. So today she will talk about the city is reclaiming the public space during the COVID-19. As we know that during the pandemic COVID-19, there will a lockdown in certain countries, and during that times, no people's come out, and the public's probably there will be lack of peoples and no interactions. So how the people's reclaiming the public spaces? So Professor Steiner will try to talk about it. Professor Stenners, the times is yours.
Thank you. And my understanding is I've already sent taped videos.
Yes. Yes, we will try to play the videos first, and after that, there will be like live speakers from you. Okay, can you start, host?
COVID-19 is creating many challenges for architects and designers in urban environments. At the moment, we are responding in the best way that we can and doing what might be called tactical urbanism. Even as we do so, we know that we will need to go back to redesign the physical and built environment to reduce the impact of similar viruses like COVID. A simple narrative in thinking about COVID is that it spreads in dense urban environments. A response to that simple version is to expect that we will have a large population increases in medium-sized cities. In other words, we will have a deconcentration of urban populations. At the same time, we can't ignore that urban environments are places where people want to live for very valid reasons, for cultural and employment reasons. So the challenge may be that we are proposing the wrong solution, that is deconcentration, when in fact we really need to identify a series of solutions that match the solution to the problem. There has always been a tension between cities and countries in urban planning and urban environments. In 1898, the suburbs were seen in Ebenezer Howe's Garden Cities of Tomorrow. Cities and towns were seen as places closing off nature, long distances from work, but at the same time, and high rents and prices. At the same time, they were also seen places of social and economic opportunity, places of amusement and entertainment, and high money wages. The country was known for its lack of society, and low wages and low rents. At the same time, was seen as a place that had beauty of nature, fresh air, and an abundance of water. The suburb was seen as a combination of these two. It would have the beauty of nature, it would have the social opportunity of cities, it would have fields and parks like the countryside. It would have low rents, high wages, plenty to do, low prices, and in general, it would end up being a good place to live. The challenge is, however, is that suburbs became satellites to urban cities, and over time they have become urbanized. And we've created larger and larger urban areas, and even with deconcentration, we will have some challenges with providing transportation. During pandemics, the forms of cities have always followed the fear of infection. In the 14th century, during the bubonic plagues, cities were motivated to make the fundamental improvements to their cities to reduce the impacts of the bubonic plague that ultimately led to the Renaissance. During the industrial era of the 1800s, waterborne diseases such as cholera and typhoid influenced the sanitary reform movement and led to the development of water and sewer systems. But ultimately, the creation of those water and sewer systems led to changes in street design to make streets straighter, smoother, and wider so that underground pipe systems could be installed. About 100 years ago, when planning began, it was a response to the evils of the city. Crowded cities and slums that lacked air and light, that had industry with noise and dust and vibration right next to residences, that led to the movement towards more suburbanization. In the United States and in many parts of the world, what we're seeing here is that by the 1950s, suburban growth had continued, really began to increase at a very rapid speed. And that trend of suburbanization in the US anyway, continued uninterrupted until the 1990s, when we began to see a movement back to the cities that had continued until quite recently. If you look at it worldwide, however, what you'll see is that we have greater urbanization than we've ever had. Now that we have the narrative of COVID, I'm using my own state as an example. If you look at this map, you will see the urban areas of Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, Miami, and the suburban counties surrounding Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach. Now, while this looks like the COVID cases are in these urban areas, but in fact, you're going to have to trust me on this, but when you look at the incidence per capita or the incidence per 10,000 or 100,000 in population, what you discover is that it's largely the northern part of the state in largely rural areas. Now that we have a narrative that says that COVID is a result of dense urban environments, we really need to understand that density is really not the only source of the problem. In fact, it may be more the concentration of people rather than the density per se, and the conditions in which people are living. For example, our response to COVID has been hand washing, improved hygiene, and social distancing or physical distancing. And from a public health perspective, contact tracing and testing. But as we have adjusted, we've had to remember the mechanism of infection. That is airborne droplets that get into the air and are transmitted through direct means, person to person, or indirectly through droplets left in the air. This suggests the importance and reinforces the importance of wearing masks. We can look again back to the beginning, and some of the narrative continues, because at the beginning it was contact with Wuhan, China, where the COVID started. And you begin to recognize that the connections to Wuhan are to urban areas across the world where people began to spread it. And yet today the virus continues, and the narrative of it being in urban areas, it continues. And density is in London and New York are examples of places that had a large flow of international visitors who initially spread it. Industrial centers like Wuhan, Seattle, Detroit, and northern Italy that are connected through supply chains were another place, and connected through business contacts. And global tourist centers, the ski slopes of Italy, Switzerland, and France, and the Colorado Rockies were places where COVID spread early on. But what we've forgotten here is that we really need to understand the local nature of the problem. Initially, it had spread into nursing homes, funeral parlors, and onto cruise ships, which can be seen as small cities at the sea. But when you look at this, you begin to recognize, and in the U.S. at least, it has spread into largely rural areas, even though the narrative continues to be that COVID is spreading in large urban areas. A recent study looked at the literature and identified 4 different areas in which cities and COVID-19 have created changes, and those were in the areas of environmental quality, socioeconomic, management and governance, transport, and urban design. In this presentation, I'm only focusing on the urban design and transport, but it's important to recognize that there are some impacts. The environmental quality is related to, you may see some increases in related to people staying at home more. For instance, particulate matter can be associated with residential heating fuels, but the emissions from automobiles have reduced certain kinds of air pollution. Additionally, air pollution can reduce the spread of COVID and increase the capacity of individuals to fight off COVID. Environmental factors like temperature and humidity are important. Temperature, you can see that in the spread as people are pushed indoors because it's too hot or too cold to be outside. You can expect some people residents having to adjust to that. And humidity, more humidity decreases the spread compared to dry environments. Water improvements, we're seeing some improvements in water quality due to reduced industrial activity, although we may see some increased water pollution due to drugs and wastewater. And we may see a need for enhanced water treatment to reduce the likelihood of transmission through fecal matter. Socioeconomic, the disparity of impact on the bottom is it has been increasing. There's increased social tensions and violence. There's also been some diminished sense of community. At the same time, COVID has had positive impacts of people working together to get through the pandemic. Food banks have, in the U.S. anyway, have had more food than they sometimes know what to do with, although we've had more hunger. We also have neighbors helping neighbors and friends. We also have increased economic impacts of closures and loss of employment due to reduced demand in certain sectors like face-to-face, that require face-to-face activities. Performances in theater and music and dance are examples of that. We've also seen changes in management and governance, differences in that. Some places have done a better job of getting different actors and sectors to cooperate, whereas others have been less effective. And in smart cities, we've seen information and communication technologies and big data analytics have been used innovatively to avoid face-to-face contact and to assist with contact tracing for those who are using the correct app. Transport and urban design, 3 things we've learned. There have been some smart mobility restrictions on air travel, for instance, and intercity travel in certain countries to reduce the transmission of the virus. We've seen an increase in negative attitudes towards public transit and a reduction in their usage, even though the subway systems in Paris and Japan have found that they have not found them to be a major factor in transmission. The fear of transmission in crowded places remains. Active transports have proved more effective in meeting mobility needs during the pandemic. And but that has led to a need for additional urban space for bicycling and walking. And in urban design area, what we've discovered is that the relationship with density is not clear. especially because there's a mediating factor of the extent to which people are wearing masks when they're densely packed or when they're concentrated. And there's a need to understand the things I'll be talking about in a moment about urban street changes and open public spaces and how helpful they are in facilitating effective physical distancing. Initially, we thought a lot about the push button. It's probably become less important as we realize that transmission isn't as significant due to surfaces, touching of surfaces. We also, if you look at this image, there's lots of people in the street. We've come to recognize what we'll show in a moment, which is we need additional urban space to allow people to keep a physical distance from people from others as they're walking down the street. Public transit has been able to do physical distancing, but it's also significantly reduced their capacity and their ability to raise revenue. In order to begin, we're beginning to look at the kind of adjustments in urban environments, and what you'll see here is that we can look at different kinds of park and open spaces that range from what I would say is parks and conservation lands or cultural, educational, and historic facilities. And basically what you have is conservation land. The big green circles are various scales from conservation lands, usually outside of cities, but to recreational, regional parks, to community parks, to neighborhood parks, and urban plazas and pocket parks. And we have things like archaeological and historical sites, museums and cultural facilities, art museums. We also have recreational, social, and educational programs, and schools and civic facilities. And finally, the streets, where we'll focus most of our attention, is on use for different facilities. There's a need for cars, there's needs for bicycle lanes, for bicyclists, sidewalks, and facilities for transit. And then there's non-roadway facilities, but that are nonetheless linear in nature, things like greenways and trails, which sometimes run parallel to the street, blueways, which are using rivers where they're available, and then there's utility corridors in most cities. When we begin to understand about how we repurpose streets, what we have is we can think about facilitating users of various modes. Transit requires some queuing room. Walking and bicycling require additional urban space. And then in the upper right, there's a slower shared street where we're slowing down the traffic by automobiles to allow all modes of travel, active travel, bicycling and walking. Dining and markets are being taken over space. Dining, because most dining takes in enclosed indoor spaces, and markets because they have historically been outdoor. Many of them have been outdoors, some are indoors, but they need to follow different protocols. It's also important to recognize there's different functions we cover in streets, which would include for schools and open play. The upper left is for schools. We have pickup and queuing, which is as shown in the transit example on the previous page. We need spaces for health and sanitation. Walk-up testing is an example where you might use the street space to do that, especially in an urban environment where people aren't going to drive there. You need to facilitate loading and unloading, which is in the lower left, and there's communications. In some places, people didn't have access to internet at where they needed. So we can also look at how the relationship to the street. The top two images are keeping the streets open and using the curb space for either pickup and drop off, or sometimes for tables. And the lower ones are showing the closing of streets. Sometimes it's right in front of the restaurant, and sometimes, depending upon the amount of traffic and the need for pickup and drop off, they might do it off to the side street. This is an example from Tampa where they closed pretty quickly. They defined a program called Lift Up Local, where they use tactical urbanism beginning in May to allow people to eat outdoors. Belgium, Brussels, Belgium created a slow street in downtown to allow pedestrians and bicyclists to be more safely distanced from each other. In San Francisco, they created what is a tent encampment for people who are homeless that provided physical distance for them so that they did not become a vector for the spread of the disease. Madison, Wisconsin created a situation with a bookmobile was turned into a place that people could vote. Seattle, Washington did pickup and delivery zones in front of restaurants in the parking spaces. Many streets in the U.S. were used for people walking in protests. In Kathmandu, they had a sit-down protest in front of the Prime Minister's official residence. And in Wuhan, China, they did testing as people went into school, and they allowed them to physically distance on their way into getting tested. And finally, a market, this is an example of a market in Audubon Park, closed down temporarily, and when it reopened, it used a health department distancing in order to allow people to be safe. It reduced the number of vendors. It required people to wear masks. It put the tents further apart so people could queue in line. So when we're looking at and thinking about where architects and designers need to make change, we recognize that urbanism is going to change, largely because office spaces, housing, and buildings will change. Public spaces, as I've described, will change temporarily and may change permanently. Housing will need to be changed in order to accommodate the connection between home and work. And office spaces will need to change to accommodate working and waiting spaces, shared facilities like lunchrooms and conference rooms, and decreased density. This is a reminder of the need for facilitating urban spaces. This is my contact information. Thank you. And I had some questions shared with me earlier today, and I can answer some of those at this point if that's what you please. Is that what you'd like me to do?
So if there is any additional explanations, you can use the times for explains about what you need to add some explanations. We have probably around 15 minutes.
Okay. And I guess people could also ask some questions in the chat. I see some of those there. Well, there's other kinds of discussion, but I received a set of questions. The first one was, which of the tactical strategies currently implemented in reclaiming public space can be brought to city regulation in the future to make the city a pandemic contextual in design? The way I think about this is that, and there's major data collection efforts worldwide to identify where cities have made adjustments and the range of adjustment to address COVID. And the range of adjustment is extremely broad. And I feel like I only touched lightly in terms of thinking about it. But as an example, the city of Bogota, Colombia, added 61 kilometers of bicycle lanes along a road, something that had been used for a roadway so that people could bicycle. And And worldwide, bicycling is becoming a major mode of choice because it allows you to move faster than you would if you were walking. It with some, but you often need additional street space. I think the dilemma we have at this point is that we don't know what's going to happen with the spaces I described on the last page, which is especially the workplace. To some extent, and it would be helpful to know a little bit about what's happening in Indonesia, but certainly in certain occupations it's possible to move to home and communicate. I mean, I'm participating in this conference from across way across the other side of the world.
Yeah,
And
yeah. We have 12 hours, isn't it?
yes, it's
12 hours difference.
So the fact that I can do this says that there are great opportunities for certain professions, of course, to engage remotely. And it's important to recognize that telecommunications plays a big role. But the nature of the conversation, at least here in the US, is that a recognition that one of the reasons we went into offices in the first place was that the face-to-face interaction was useful in creating innovative ideas and ensuring that different people worked on different aspects of projects, and that chance meetings in offices were helpful, and that their benefits outweigh everybody working remotely. So there is, but I also believe that what happens to the city is going to be fundamentally driven by how businesses individually think about where they locate. There are starting to be horror stories in the US about major office buildings in New York City being completely empty. And there's an argument that at some point, but that's partly driven by no one's willingness to be on public transit. And I think understanding the way I've always thought about urban planning and design solution is that to a large extent, there is a large toolbox. There's a lot of different solutions, but that each place needs to figure out what solutions could work for them, their own context, what kind of spaces they have, what's the nature of the local problem. What's interesting in looking through these solutions now internationally is that, for instance, there are some places where they've taken parts of streets and they've created not necessarily a big farmers market in the way that I showed in this presentation, but bringing food by taking up one lane of traffic, or taking the places where buses used to go because the buses aren't running or they aren't running as frequently, and using those spaces. I would also say that even prior to COVID, there was beginning to be a rethinking of the curb, at least the curb space in American cities and many Western cities, because of disruptions in the taxi industry. In the US and Europe, and actually even in Singapore, I used something called Uber and Lyft are global companies that provide on-demand rides, and they're stopping in very different places. The invention of the autonomous vehicle was also getting people to think about how do we think about curb space. So the forces towards reallocation of space, I would say, were there prior to COVID, But in some respects, because we've reduced automobile traffic to such a large magnitude, we've created an opportunity to rethink how those spaces ought to be used. But I would argue that those kinds of discussions will likely need to be decided at the city level, because that's often where those types of decisions are made. At the same time, sometimes national governments can sometimes prevent reuses of urban space by virtue, especially on, for instance, national roads. So there's a real tension in here, but we can't ignore the fact that there is and has been for a long time, and it's to a greater or lesser extent depending upon local context, has been lots of contestation of urban space, and asking the question about how much do we indeed need to allocate for automobiles, how much for transit, how much for bicyclists, how much for pedestrians. And certainly during this period, there is a temporary reallocation. The real question, and I fear that I don't even feel comfortable taking a guess on what's going to happen, but because I believe it may end up being in local places. Some places are doing what I would call tactical urbanism. That term often refers to small spaces. And so, at least in the US context, tactical urbanism would be the kind of thing where you might take a parking space and turn it into a park for one day, only to show that we can bring more green space into the city. Now, you might do it in one space, but over time expand it to take over a whole street. And those kinds of strategic interventions, I believe, can, they may follow from what's happening currently. So that's one thought I have about this reclaiming urban space, because I really think it's, in the past, there would have been a major battle for bicyclists to say we need another lane in downtown. But now the demand is increased and the opportunity is increased because of the increased demand. And there's a health imperative that says you can't be too close. And there's no conflict because there aren't enough drivers wanting the space that drivers in cars used to have. So the dynamic has changed a bit. The question is whether that dynamic continues, or how that reshapes at the end of this and how we ease out of it. Because the other dilemma with reduced use of public transport is that people who are wealthy enough to purchase a car are going to get cars, and we may run into greater conflicts for urban space because there will be more people with cars in the future. So
Yeah.
I know I'm sounding like I'm talking in circles, but really I would say that we're really in a very uncertain future, in a very uncertain period, because we're still in that temporary period where I think any city official where there's been more space put out for bicyclists or pedestrians would have a hard time saying, no, you can't have that space, because you would make the public health argument. So I'm not keeping track of time. So Kenny, I hope you'll be willing to come in.
Okay.
What do you think about developing countries whose definition of public space can be relatively different compared to your examples? What happened to their type of public space during this pandemic situation? I went, this is what prompted me to go. I had looked a couple weeks ago, I had looked at some of the examples, but I didn't go dig deeply into them. And what's interesting for me is to realize how broad these kind of interventions have been, how worldwide. There's a couple of examples from Indonesia, I'm not sure how accurate they are, but at least someone's reporting the street in Jakarta has been, I'll have to find it on my computer here. But there's a large number of examples from the Philippines. There's examples from Uganda. There's examples from South Africa. There's examples from Kenya. There's Republic of Congo. This is not, and many of them are these kinds of things, like a pop-up temporary bike lane is not an unusual type of change. And they are being classified in the general sense in a related manner to that which I indicated, which is sometimes taking over parking lanes because if fewer people are driving to get places, then there's no parking, then there's parking spaces open, then you ask the question, can you put a table for a restaurant? So, and New York City, there's another question I was being asked is about how will we formalize some of these things? In New York City, they allowed restaurants to pay $5,000 to get access to parking space. So they had a whole permitting place and process for on-street parking use as a restaurant. But I do think, I mean, the challenge, the other question is, what about countries that lack public space? I have to say, I was in Indonesia just over a year ago, and one of the things that struck me when I was in Jakarta, and I didn't have a chance to talk to somebody who knows the history of the building of the transportation network in Jakarta, but it felt like the city was built and then the highway came through later. And so this is a very valid question. One of the ways I think, though, about public spaces is that sometimes they end up being created for multiple purposes. So as an example, many years ago, I was in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and one of the things that they had is a relatively new park, but the city was growing so rapidly that they had a lot of trouble with water quality when they had major storms. And eventually they decided they would create this huge park. But the park served both recreational uses, but even more importantly, it allowed for, when they had intermittent flooding, this park would absorb the overflow water, and it allowed the city, other parts of the city, to no longer be flooded. So I understand the challenges in cities, but the way I often think about public spaces, and that was the other reason I started talking about functions, is that when you're thinking about public spaces, it's often easier to get people to agree that something's a good idea if it has multiple purposes that serve the community in different ways. And that's one way I would think about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. How are we doing on time, Kenny? I want to respect your schedule.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for the talk, Professor Steiner. Yeah, actually, we already almost finished for the times for the your sections, actually.
Okay.
I want to say thank you very much for Professor Steiner for the talks. Actually, we still have, there is another question for you actually in the chats, but
Yes,
because of
that.
because of the time limits, I think would you maybe just answer the question maybe outside
I'm
of
trying to find I'm having trouble finding the chat right now.
yeah,
so.
okay. I want to say thank you very much for the times. I know that it's very tough for you because it's already night in Florida, and You already spare times for speakings in this conference. It's very nice, and the topics also very interesting. It's about the reclaiming the cities during the pandemic COVID-19. Yeah, although there is still questions about how to manage the public spaces demand in the place that there are limited of public spaces. Yeah, I think this is the questions for all of us, and to find the problem solvings, how to tackle about that problems in the futures. Thank you very much for Professor Erdsteiner.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed putting this together.
Thank you. Okay, so our next sections, we will talk about another public spaces for dwellings, for urban dwellings. We have keynote speakers from University of Indonesia. The name is Evawani Elisa, PhD. So Evawani Elisa, Mrs. Evawani Elisa pursued her doctoral studies at Urban and Environmental Design Laboratory from Department of Environmental Engineering in Osaka Universities. Currently become a lecturer in University of Indonesia, and she will try to talk about the titles uncovering the creativity and resilience of the urban dwellers through horizontal engagement. What is that? The horizontal engagement. So probably we try to invite our keynote speaker, Mrs. Evawani Elisa. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Kenny, for the very nice introduction. Selamat pagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm really grateful for giving us a precious opportunity as the keynote speaker in this conference. Let me share my presentation. Wait. So maybe I better stop my video to get the better connection. Sorry, it should be me to share, right? Because the organizer already get the
it
video.
Can be from host, Mrs. Evawani.
But actually, I changed my presentation.
Oh, okay.
Because they asked me to change.
Okay.
So maybe you should stop this from the host.
Okay.
Okay. Because I need to extend the presentation because there is no answer question this time.
Yes.
Wait. Okay. While we are waiting, the title of my presentation is the Uncovering the Creativity and Resilience of the Urban Dwellers Through Horizontal Engagement. And unlike Professor Ruth, I mostly would like to discuss the situation before COVID-19, just to make my presentation theme of this iDwell conference this time. Okay, I'm sure that everybody is architect, especially is very familiar with Jane Jacob. She's a journalist who's speaking up against the most powerful ideas in urban planning and who also believed that the city should be fun. She had an eye of detail and she appealed the designer to just go out, see what works and what doesn't work, learn from reality, spend time in the street, see and learn how people actually use the spaces. And these are some examples. The scenery of foodscape in different places I absolutely could not find if I just stay in the place called home, campus, library, or other convenient places. I believe that the investigation of the creativity and resilience of the urban dwellers through horizontal engagement would help to understand how cities work, how they break down, and how they could be better structured. Jane Jacob inspired me to be what I have been done in the way I am observing the urban dwelling. My passion on cities drive me for wandering many places. I had lucky enough to have the chance to visit before this pandemic, at a time when the international mobilities had so common among inhabitants of this planet. I enjoy free movement with a billion of people and see the cities outside my birth country. Cities in the global south, for example, in Nepal, they expose everything in contrast to the more standard top-down, optical, and abstract interpretation of city life. In Pasupatinat, at the plateau of Bagmati River, the Hindu cremation takes place on industrial scale based on Hindu's belief system. We might think that this ritual is bizarre, but we need to understand that city as an integrated system that had their own logic and dynamism. Through horizontal bottom-up engagement within the city like this, I want to understand, to capture, and to feel the dynamics and practices of cities on daily basis. Good low-rise district with narrow alley in between the blocks at Shanghai leave the rural residents who have already migrated to the cities and win the status of official legal residents by converting the rural hukou into an urban one, allowing them to settle down in Shanghai. Hukou is the Chinese system established in 1950s that records household registration by birthplace and determine where the Chinese citizen may live. However, a lot of floating migrants who lack access to social services like healthcare, housing, and education, they hold a rural hukou, and thus they are not considered as urban residents. They experience tough work and living conditions and endure the displacement of political, economic, and social, and they have to make living in the street. So even in Shanghai, I found the situation which is similar to the cities in the global south, where the street and sidewalk become the battleground to make living. In 2013, I visited Times Square, New York, to see and sense the ambience of how lively this place. Times Square is the representation of both creativity and resilience of the New Yorkers. And visiting Times Square at that time, we need to date back in 2009 when Tim Tompkins from the Times Square Alliance initiated to install 376 folding chairs. And this simple multicolored plastic lawn chair was a source of amusement to many New Yorkers. So plastic chair held the symbolic meaning. As the most successful tactical urbanism on earth, it transformed and congested vehicular district into a vibrant public place in the heart of New York City, with a measurable positive impact on public safety, air quality, and also economic output. Times Square is a model for how the rigid, formal infrastructure of the road had been transformed and humanized into an important space for democratic gathering, thanks to the efforts and support of the New Yorkers. I would like to quote Mike Lydon here on tactical urbanism. Quote, "It's all about trying things quickly and modestly and learning what works and what doesn't work, then taking what works well, and then feeding that back into the design, planning, and the development process. It's a low cost and low risk, both politically and financially." End quote. I'm impressed by Amin of what he calls as telescopic urbanism and the poor. Amin is a professor of geography at University of Cambridge who consistently focusing on informal settlement in the global south. In his view, telescopic urbanism, which is both imaginary and code of practice, regularly bypass the poor, casting them not as the part of the urban central, but as part of the urban peripheral. In the world of urbanism, there's always two tendencies. One is a strong tendency of the typical urban actors, known as the business consultants urbanism. the interest in the international competitiveness and urban growth, represented by the eagerness to visionary bring the city to become the world-class city. Yet, what make I love the city is when I see the city in the eyes of the human potential urbanism, focusing on the creativeness and resilience of the urban dwellers. Topic urbanism of As Amin seems ambiguous by this representation. Jakarta as the world-class megacity and Jakarta as the informal city appeared at the same frame, like in this Kampung Cikini, which surrounded by commercial and business entities. Kampung Cikini is our living laboratory in these past 10 years. This is the place where I could see how people showing their resilience in spending their hard life in Jakarta. Example, one night at Kampung Cikini, I saw a group of women engaging local music, which is called marawis. Another day, in the middle of the very hot day, someone just pay for mobile karaoke, the music set up, and then all gathering and join the singing. After hours, they just disperse without said anything. So various ways of texturing times would release the stressful, and perhaps because of this, no need for the government to provide sort of mental health care for the informal class. So Kampung Cikini is typical urban riverfront, already mentioned in the old map in 1930s, 1925. So it is also Kampung Satu Abad. Yesterday, Dr. Kengo Hayashi has been presented about this Kampung Satu Abad. The densification started in 1960s when the government removed the railway track, followed by the act of the inhabitants to squat the empty land. Now Cikini populated by officially 3,800, or according to airway leaders, it resided by 5,000 permanent and temporary dwellers. Kampung Cikini is very small. It covered only 3 times of football ground. One day, a Japanese student tried to literally draw the football ground at any surface which is possible to be drawn, and it appeared like this. Since the area is not more than 4 hectares, we need to fly a drone to figure out the exact of this kampung. So this is the pocket kampung of Cikini, sit in a location at the second ring of Jakarta. Remember that the first ring is Monas over there, and also the President Palace over there as well. If you want to visit this kampung by commuter line, you just stop at Cikini station, cross the street, and this kampung is located in such a way, since it's divided by traditional old market called Pasar Cikini, which form into access from the station to the iron bridge that also become one of the gates of 5 gates exist at Cikini. A small river called Kali Kroncong laid in perpendicular across Pasar, and the river goes all the way to Kali Ciliwung. The surrounding commercial and business development enable the inhabitant of this kampung to gain the economic opportunities by offering services and petty business. What we had been done in Cikini in these last 10 years was not easy, but in short, we have 2 types of engagements at Cikini. One is through design and build project, or we call this as urban acupuncture project. So this is the situation before and after acupuncture. And 2 of these acupuncture projects had been done by my colleagues, Dr. Ahmad Herifuat and his team. Maybe he's around now. The other engagement is UI Japanese student join studio workshop, we call as JKTWS. And this activity had consistently never been absent every year. Maybe another time, I might have the chance to explain in detail about this JKTWS. This year, during this pandemic, JKTWS also had been conducted online in last September. Cikini. Walking to the alleys of Kampung Cikini will allow you to experience the hardship of kampung's living condition which is intensified by crowding, either inside the house or indoor, and outside the house or outdoor. Slowly through the alley, we understand that all elements along the alley have certain meaning and function. The kampung arrangement and neighborhood condition exposing how the spatial practice of kampung put into question on conventional distinction between public and private. So everything is become upside down or overlaid each other. Once in a while, or at least every week in Friday, the community will clean the alley, put the long vinyl plastic throughout the alley, and suddenly the alley transforms into the clean, purified place for praying. In other day, the alley become the ideal place for the community to distribute the meat during the Islamic Qurban, at the time when many poor community members of Cikini have the right to receive these Qurban meats. This is the way when the community utilized the intersection of the node at Kampung for various events, from community gathering to religious teaching. Last time, I was invited to give presentation in the webinar conducted by Ministry of Housing and Settlement, and I had been asked, is it possible to erase the messiness of Kampung? My answer is yes, not only erasing the messiness, but also beautifying Kampung. Although you have to remember that it only lasts only for one day. And we proved this when Genta, a former Japanese student who lived in Kampung for 1 year, decided to hold a wedding ceremony in Cikini. And for this one-day event, we practiced the so-called communing, where the student and the community work together to plan and design the procession route, starting from this point, and ending to this point. So, and some small intervention are located along the road for surprising the wedding couples and all community members, who then broke into cheerfulness and happiness. Now let's talk about the other infrastructure, the open space at Kampung Cikini. Some decades ago, the government had enacted standard to apply open space that enable the community to play on at least or doing other communal activities. But now it all remained into memory because the open space had been transformed into motorbike parking. Try to identify the situation at the open space, it was surprising to find that these motorbikes are there almost all the day, and not only during the night, so that women, children, and all other community members who intend to utilize this open space should consider the motorbikes as the existing fixed elements in the context of open space at Kampung. Of course, in special days, like during the celebration of our Independence Day, this open space was returned back to its role for the true children playground, and even for having a wedding ceremony, another one, means that it getting back to its practical purpose to build the sense of belonging and togetherness. Let me explain about the most important infrastructure of water, or as Amin often regarded this as the staple of urban food, of urban poor, since anybody cannot imagine to live without clean water. 100 years long history of Kampung enabled this community to do self-help urban service, or what Trigger Thrift call as informal infrastructuring. And unlike the normal neighborhood in Kampung, you should become part of infrastructure itself. Means that if you want to clean up yourself, you have to fetch water to do your business, a situation which is very different from the normal neighborhood where you just automatically flush and finish. The most difficult problem is how to get rid of the waste and the grey water at Kampung ground. As you can see in this slide, all solid and liquid waste from toilet and kitchen straightly go to the small river of Kali Keroncong without any processing to neutralize, such as using safety tank or any controlling device. So this is how the sewage network in Cikini from household goes to the ditch and then to Kali Keroncong, and at the end goes to Kali Ciliwung and pollute the river. Realizing that basic infrastructure of this staple element of kampung is really crucial, recently we are focusing on the idea to help the community to improve the public toilet or MTK. This high-dense settlement has 29 MTKs to supply the shortage of existing individual latrines that are insufficient to cover the demand of toilet for these 5,000 residents. Originally, MTK is infrastructure provided by the government as a solution to increase health and hygiene level in high-density informal settlement. The government set up standard of MTK, and during 1980s, the government tried to abolish all the MTK usually set up by the inhabitant along the river or Ciliwung River. Arises when it comes for the time to improve the existing of MTK, since many MTK had never been rehabilitated from the beginning of the construction. One example is this MTK at RT 11 Kampung Cikini. In 2015, co-funded by UI and Japan, is to rehabilitate this MTK, and as you can see in this picture, we built with the intention to continue the development into two-story building in the second phase of development. This is the time when we finished the first floor. In the following year, in 2016, we finally complete the building into like this. In the first floor, we keep the function of MTK, and in the second floor, we added the sort of multi-function room. Now we utilize the second floor as our base camp in managing the community engagement at Cikini, but in the long term, we intend to return it back to the community when they get ready, so they could use the second space for rental room, so that the community could gain a kind of revenue or endowment that could be used for maintaining the public facilities at kampung. In 2014, we have the project for rehabilitation of MTK at another RT, this time at RT 14. And in this project, before we start to design, one of my ex-students, Anwar Bahir, doing research on how the people at Cikini applied a specific way of doing during the ritual cleaning. To the community, surprising that the first design was rejected by the community, although detailed observation had been done prior to the design. The problem is that we are getting used with the concept that privacy is important in designing toilet. But according to the community, toilets should be designed in such a way that the young people would not use the toilet for hiding to consume drugs. The community also asks to remove the door to avoid any harms and negative way of doing inside the closed toilet. Project at kampung is always challenging. Like in this project, since it is very difficult to access the site because it's located deep in the corner of kampung through the meandering path and that alley, we have to transport the material of Kali Keroncong. This is the toilet after rehabilitation. We also apply the multi-function for the community at the second floor. Mentioned you and earlier, Cikini is a very tightly packed and compact settlement with a high intensity of the passerby or strangers, that it provides abundant economic opportunities in one side, but socially vulnerable on other side. And in this case, since Cikini is one of the typical slum in Jakarta that face the problem of drug dealers and drug consumption, the most vulnerable element is, of course, the MTK. The location of MTK really inviting for doing drug consumption. Therefore, MTK truly represent one of the wicked problems that should be faced at high-dense kampung, both the problem of health and also the problem of social illness. Another problem at Cikini is the presence of very primitive toilet popular among the community, helicopter toilet. Helicopter refers to the condition of the toilet that sit on the river in such a way like helicopter. So anybody who intend to do their business, they just simply sit and all the waste will directly go down to the Keroncong River. The best solution must be just remove the toilet and move into another site or incorporate the MTK with the other MTK. Those increase the capacity of other existing toilet or MTK. But it was surprising that although MTK is public, in fact, the community defines a kind of unwritten rule to set up an invisible territory of every MTK. Therefore, the scenario to move the toilet in another site eventually is impossible, and we try to maximize as much as possible the existing situation so that consuming the drug at toilet could be avoided. This is still ongoing project and stop at present because we run off the budget and also because of the pandemic. Very small project, but also very, very interesting since so much strategy should be applied technically and socially. After 10 years involved in Cikini, I often being asked, why Cikini is messy? My answer is that we would never been able to erase the messiness, and also because it is not our intention to eliminate the messiness of kampung. I think we as the outsiders need to understand the messiness before judging the messiness of slum. Our theme for joint studio workshop in 2017 was recollage, or a skill of using whatever at hand to create something new. The workshop uncovered that when you see the junks or the things seem to be unuseful at any corner of kampung, you need to understand that the inhabitants keep these all things, partly because lack of storage, and partly because one day they will use them for practicing bricolage. I tell you that enjoying this situation, again, only during the Independent Day, where all the community do communing to beautify kampung and then keep the kampung clean, was lasting less only 1 week. But it is more than enough for the community at Cikini. After 1 week, time for them to back to reality and struggle to survive, facing the hardship living at megacity of Jakarta. Okay, that's the story about Cikini, and let's get back to see the infrastructure of Jakarta. The urban as ecology often describes as infrastructural assemblage, the amalgam of the system that make up the urban built environment at its supplies, from transport and communication to energy, water, and welfare service. However, paradoxically, the urban dwellers, especially those who are not considered as the elites, but the prosaic, the informal, and the surviving, appropriate and blurs out the focus of infrastructure. The infrastructure in the city has residual space that are perceived by this group as non-functional spaces. The residual space then appropriate or taken over. Fieldman and Stock state that the appropriation of space is the creation, choice, ownership, modification, repair, maintenance, or just simple as the act of using a space which aim to make the space one owns, carried out by individual and groups. The first example is the appropriation of leftover space in the pedestrian bridge. In the city of Jakarta, dominated by automobile, there are 324 pedestrian bridges in total. The appearance of this elevated infrastructure leaves space beneath. The structure is seen as urban residual space, which is, according to Nielsen, since the space does not have clear regulation and ownership, it created the superfluous landscape. It took place in space below, which is indicate freedom or open to free way of perceiving. The openness of space below is generating a potential to transform into meaningful spaces through the act of reclaiming and appropriation. In our research on pedestrian bridge at Lantai, Southern Jakarta, we found out how a pedestrian bridge offers the new opportunity of engagement, and it is not particularly holding the utility as the crossing facility. Rush and flow are taking place on the bridge. There's also a possibility of underworld happening beneath the pedestrian bridge. The residual spaces beneath connote freedom and opportunity for engagement. As the residual spaces are open for free way of perceiving, it provides potential outlets for the unexpected and informal. Pedestrian bridge at Tanah Abang span along 400 meters to solve the problem of congestion. Street vendors line along the bridge, often the unregulated and chaos, force the pedestrian to shortcut and create the problem of jaywalking. The street vendors' domination makes the original role of the bridge into giant elevated vendor stall. At Lantai, here the superfluous landscape also been created with the different degree of intervention between the west and the east side. The bridge create the abundant space as the backside of the design space, but offers an alternative to the possibility of public appearance, responding to the increasingly formless and heterogeneous urban field. Some effort had continuously been done by the local government to avoid unnecessary appropriation and misuse of public space. For example, the urban dwellers who arriving Juanda station enjoy the implementation of pedestrian-friendly program with wide sidewalk, tactile wayfinding, accessible ramp, and also lateral separation to prevent the motorbike encroachment. 18, I challenge my student, Muhammad Rizky, to understand how the street vendors perceive the urban space, and in this case, the street and the sidewalk. The method was following the informal actor actively utilize the street of the snack food vendors, and his name is Pak Didin. Rizky's mission was observing how the street vendors interact with the urban space. Found it how Didin had to avoid risks, how he had to repeatedly observe the situation to use the avoidance tactic and strategy in utilizing the urban features while he was selling the food. Mobile street vending foods are very common and part of every day of our urban life. Yet, after observing how Didin struggle and risk his life on street, some questions raised. Should urban planners and traffic engineers focus merely on how automobile and pedestrian move freely and smoothly? So to consider some actors very visible in reality, yet under the radar planning, or the people like Didin, to be included into the planning agenda, since they are also the essential actors. As we know, there are many Didin in the cities who distribute the food and drink to the city. They fulfill the need of energies for the daily activities of the urban dwellers. To move to Ciliwung Riverfront. The Ciliwung River used to be the Jakarta's giant drainage system, but began to decline when it served for garbage disposal. In 2013, the government began to clean up the Ciliwung River, built the retaining walls to widen and fencing the river. The development of retaining walls causes the kampung's resident houses had been pushed away a few meter back wide on the bank of Ciliwung, and the river bank cannot be directly accessed by the city dwellers. However, the government does not provide any supervision toward the river. The lack of control was resulting the river being perceived as an abandoned and unprotected space, and eventually encouraged informal takeover. At first, the resident makeshift wooden stairs as a means to access the riverbank and continue to make several material appropriation. As the riverbank has an elongated shape, the spatial arrangements are in a linear fashion so that preserve the riverbanks as a continuous space. Chairs are not placed facing each other to maximize interaction and not block access along the riverbank. Large objects such as birdhouses are placed near the wall of the banks so as not to fall into the river. The residents set up layout in such a way to provide a vista or visual access to the river for the resident while relaxing. The use of materials such as wood and bamboos are mostly chosen for the convenience of the residents. Impermanent structures such as wooden huts are easily removable and yet not permanently and negatively affect the riverbank in the future. Impacts in the post-space appropriation is the use of the riverbank for urban farming. The POK10 program, or Farmers Group in Kampung, is a group of urban farmers who use the riverbank for additional income through farming and breeding catfishes. Now the riverbank perceive a new meaning, increase the attachment and sense of belonging implied from the frequency of activities in space and active participation of the community to guard and maintain the riverbank. Riverbank in the city of Jakarta are still considered as residual space due to their perception that there's access to the space. This proves that the riverbank in Jakarta may not be able to reach the city level public space, such as Clark Q in Singapore. However, through a small-scale appropriation, the riverbank can fulfill the need of public space at the neighborhood level. A positive appropriation should be encouraged as long as it will be under the control of RT or RW so that there is no damage and disturb the river environment. The bank of Ciliwung River adjacent to Kampung Cikini, so a little bit back to Cikini, the construction of the inspection route along both river banks created a new interface between two systems of informal kampung and the formal river restoration. Here, the inspection path along the river transformed into a surface that formed a fixed boundary between formal and informal. In 2016, the surface had been proposed as the route for the wedding parade, wedding, of Japanese students formerly live at Kampung Cikini. Site cleaning and painting process had been done through mutual collaboration between the students and local community. Bamboo red carpet and canopy installation erected for enliven the riverside as the place for wedding parade. Parade celebrate the riverside as the fun place. The riverside is not only considered as the inspection route, but also could be transformed as happening sidewalk for the wedding couple, for the parents, children, students, and all local community members. I would like to draw the line here and stop showing you some cases from the city ground through the lenses of our urban cluster in Department of Architecture UI that become our base camp to conduct many bottom-up research. Before ended, I need to quote Newward in his book entitled Shadow Cities. Quote, in a city that is more than 50% squatters, it is not the squatters who are the city within the city. Rather, the middle class and the wealthy constitute the small separate enclave. The well-off are the city within the city. The squatters are the majority, so they are the city. My final statement as an epilogue, with the crisis of this pandemic, perhaps the future cities will be the cities for the poor. Thank you. Okay, then I have stop sharing.
Okay,
Sorry, it takes time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for Mrs.
Elisa.
Stefani Elisa for the presentations about the urban dwellings, especially about the cases in the Cikini and another certain areas in Jakarta. Yeah, it's very interesting topics about how to tackle the problems and the limits of the public spaces and how to like use the limited public spaces for the public purposes. I want to say thank you very much again to Mrs. Elisa for the times that given to us. Probably now we want to move for the next keynote speakers. The next keynote speakers, it's still about the urban lives. So during the urban life, there will be likes utilities that we always use, such as like waters or electricities and another things. So these studies are probably about the statistical predictions about the utility peaks of loads in the multiple dwellings that will be conducted by Professor Jun Tanimoto. So Professor Jun Tanimoto is a professor from interdisciplinary graduate schools of engineering science, and he also becomes Deputy Dean of Interdisciplinary Graduate School of Engineering Science in QC University in 2019. So he already awarded for so many awards here for academics and also the other fields. Professor Jintanimoto actually have also published many publications in the research about urban climatology, heat islands, heat and moisture simultaneous transfers, multi-agent simulations, complex theory, evolutionary game theory, numerical biology, nonlinear physics, statistical physics, and human environmental social systems. So we would like to invite Professor Jun Tanimoto to share about his presentations. The title is Statistical Predictions of Utility Peaks Loads of Multiple Dwellings, the most important issues in smart cities. Okay, maybe the host can start for the videos.
It's a great honor to have this opportunity. My talk is entitled with Statistical Prediction of Utility Peak Roads of Multiple Dwellings, with the subtitle for Most Important Issue for Smart City. Before entering the body contents, let me give you a brief introduction about myself. Here you could see some statistical or figures, numbers of my research output, touching with Google Scholars, Corpus, Research Canyon, and so forth. Aside from being as a university professor, perhaps this amazing year, I have been active as a novelist, at the same time, the professional painter. Although those two cannot be a right business, or I think those two are quite important for me to stand up as a university professor in a classroom to share something with youth, younger generation. Aside from our tedious story about myself, let me touch with a great history of the conference, our conference, CDNet, Regional Conference on Energy Engineering, which has a profound relationship with Indonesia, this country. In fact, back in 2019, in last year, our conference was held in Banyuwangi, which is one of the most important, popular the resort spot in this country. 2018, we went to Manila. 2017, we went to Yangon, where you could see our fancy buildings, including World Heritage. classic British colonial style fancy buildings in downtown side, including City Hall. Back in 2016, we went to Phnom Penh. Again, 2015, we visited this country in Indonesia, Yogyakarta. In 2014, our conference had our inception at Bangkok. That's all about our press story before entering the body of my presentation. Okay, my talk this time can be, the term was a single keyword, that is smart. There have been many smarts nowadays: smart grid, smart cities, smart building, and so forth. As you know very well, when you say that smart grid, it implies that our electric power delivering system in which you put what is called renewable energy stuffs, like PV or wind turbine, as well as cogeneration system as much as possible, so as to minimize reliance on the conventional the resources, such as crude oil, coal, and nuclear stuffs, and so forth. To make sure the smart grid system for the best design, the concept of optimization is most important. What optimization means in this context? Well, that means because renewable energy stuffs are very unstable, fully depending upon the weather condition, the optimization, which implies that the best matching to connect between supply side and the demand side, is crucially important. To make sure that most important thing is precise prediction of demand side, utility demand, with a fine time resolution. When you say utility demand, it implies not only electric power, but also natural gas, hot water, domestic city water, domestic hot water, the thermal energy requirement, including cooling and heating and so forth. Here you could see the visual explanation about smart grid system, in which all the stuffs are connected each other, including conventional power plant things, including nuclear power generation system, especially in the developed country. And as I said, as much as possible, you install PV, wind turbine, in some cases, putting the battery system and so forth. Again, to make sure that for the best design or optimization based on the precise prediction for demand side, utility demand is quite important. For next several slides, let us be concerned on thermal requirement, which is one of the important elements amid utility demand, which implies, of course, the cooling and heating requirement. And to make sure the precise prediction of our thermal requirement, the most important thing is precise prediction of occupants' behavior taking place in each of the dwelling units relating to air conditioning load. Concerning this point, there have been a bunch of many previous works by the great precursors. One of those was concerned on occupants' behavior, as you could see here, relating to air conditioning load. In fact, this particular work was concerned on exploring probability of window opening and window closing and indoor temperature. That's one thing. As a second trend, there have been many field survey works on exploring air conditioning usage in real residential buildings, putting our hydrothermometers, many hydrothermometers, so as to measure indoor temperature operating from air conditioning system, as well as, of course, outdoor air temperature. Why this kind of field survey is necessary is that we should predict compiled our accumulated road curve with for utility bands in a fine time resolution. Well, what's happening in each of the residential units is different. For example, our family A has this road curve in which the time appearing peak time, bringing it peak time appears in the morning time like that. Family B has different, family C, D, respectively, have the road curve, of course. Compiling all of those residential units as a most important, most interesting thing for us right now is predicting entire road curve over the accumulated, the old dwellings, 100,000, 10,000, millions in some cases, if you are interested in dealing with entire city. But of course, the accumulated road curve or the utility demand is quite different from what happening in each of the dwellings. So then this is very tough job to predict the entire accumulated road curve of this. And for this question, the conventional idea of building physics has very, in a sense, ridiculous thing in which we did presume what is called the standard schedule that is fully shared with all entire residential units, family A, B, C, whatever. Having the same standard schedule, which is unrealistic in a sense. But anyway, depending upon this and presuming weather condition, relying in the dynamic building or calculation energy requirement for the energy requirement, we are able to predict the road curve of cooling or heating road, which would be multiplied with the total number of the dwellings. Anyway, we are able to accumulate it the road curve like that. Of course, this is too much. This is overestimated just because that we presume the standard schedule, which is unrealistic. What's happening in the real world is that each of the dwellings has respectively totally different schedule. And based on that, we have to compile, we have to predict real accumulated the road curve. But this is very tough job, as I said. So then, we embarked this project many years ago, back in 2005, 2006. The big controversy at the beginning to this end, the approach that we decided to presume is bottom-up approach, which is one of the jargons in the field of information science. Which means that depending upon precise prediction on what's happening in each of the dwellings, exactly summing up all of those units, residential dwelling units, we should predict the compiled accumulated road curve. As I said, this is very tough job. If you refers to the conventional common sense. But nowadays, it's not so difficult just because it's knowing very well capability of our computer resource has been progressed very much. So then we are able to do this kind of thing. And also, the procedure, the idea, concept of the bottom-up approach is very powerful, because it ensures flexibility and robustness. Once you establish the framework of the prediction, based on a bottom-up approach, the framework is very flexible so as to adjust to a different situation taking place in next 5 years, the decade, for example, in which You have different family structure. You would have inhabitants, different inhabitants attributes from the current status, and so forth. As long as based on the bottom-up approach, only the thing to adjust to new situation, right? That is just replacing one of the pieces of the framework, one of the submodels, composing the entire the framework for the prediction. That's why I have just a bit said it is as flexible and robust. And in 2006, 2005, we successfully established the comprehensive framework based on artificial society that was installed in the world of our supercomputer system, which is named Total Utility Demand Prediction System, of which acronym is TUDPS, which has, roughly speaking, two columns. The first column deals with the process for generating role-like inhabitants behavior schedule based on public information delivered by the public organization in Japan, NHK, which delivers the average value and its standard deviation of precise occupants' behavior schedule in 15 minutes time resolution. That's one thing. As the second, another column is a submodel for building thermal system, in which we started from the building dynamic simulation system, comprehensive energy prediction, the framework, in cooperation with weather data as input. And also there is another quite important, another probabilistic submodel to deal with at what time each of occupants turns on air conditioning system or turns off air conditioning system, based on what is called Markov chain, to deal with the probabilistic feature of thermal load. Well, let me give you a little bit the detailed explanation about two columns. The first column dealing with generating role-like inhabitants behavior schedule. Depending upon whether it's coming to weekday or holiday, depending upon our attributes is whether working male or the housewife, or depending upon the gender, depending upon the age group, our occupant behavior schedule taking place in a certain single day is different. As an example, for instance, the schedule may start with sleeping, just because at midnight, getting up and having the breakfast, commuting, and during the daytime, to working back into home, enjoying with family members, and so forth. Anyway, based on very sophisticated algorithm, explaining the following slides, we are able to regenerate role-like inhabitants behavior schedule in 15 minutes time of resolution. The algorithm is based on what is called generate and kill, the concept, which is another jargon in the field of information science. The idea is very simple, which can be likened the puzzle, playing a puzzle in a sense. A single day can be regarded as the holes of puzzle. There are 96 holes just because time of resolution is 15 minutes. And based on the public statistical information that I mentioned before, we are able to probabilistically predict kinds of puzzle pieces, like sleeping, having the breakfast, or the dinner, and so forth. And also we are able to probabilistically predict the size of each of the puzzle pieces for red, green, and purples. The remaining job is just putting each of those puzzle pieces into the 96 holes. That's what generate and kill process doing on the spot. Anyway, based on that, we are able to predict role-like inhabitants' behavior schedule for each of the occupants in a single day, which makes us to predict what is called erratic household consumptions, and also it makes us predict the consumption of domestic hot water and city water and so forth. But there is one thing that just obtaining inhabitants' behavior schedule does not bring the prediction. That is the thermal requirement, the heating load and cooling load. Because the thermal requirement is not only affected by the inhabitants' behavior schedule, including each of the inhabitants are being presented or absent on the spot, but also affected by the weather condition, and also they are affected by the thermal properties of the envelope building, including how much insulation is installed and so forth. And more importantly, quite importantly, at what timing each of the occupants turning on air conditioning system, significantly affects on the thermal requirement. We have to deal with that. As I said, for that part, they implemented another probabilistic SAT model. Anyway, to this end, back in 2005, 2006, TUDPS was built, which is able to reproduce realistic drama taking place, what's happening in each of the dwelling unit, in each of the family, composing our residential building, composing city, in which the TUDPS presumes, of course, the thermal property of the building envelope and also mechanical or characteristic, including what is called the COP, coefficient of performance of the air conditioning system, and so forth. To this end, TUDPS brings the precise time series of electric power consumption, domestic hot water consumption, city water, and natural gas, and so forth, in 15 minutes time of resolution, as you could see here. Let me share some important results from the TUDPS. Here you could see the maximum total electric power demand and domestic hot water, the maximum domestic hot water demand versus how many dwellings you're presuming to deal with the peak load representing the region. If you come to just one single dwelling, when you are presumed on just one single dwelling out of the entire residential units, the peak load is quite large, right? That take a look on here, yes, which is quite large. With increase of the number of dwellings to be considered, say 10, more precisely 14, the peak load of the maximum total electric power is reduced very much. Take a look in here. And to this end, if you increase the number of the residential units, say 100, the maximum total electric power demand can be reduced almost half than the case of one single unit. Why this happens can be imaginable for you, just because if you look at what's happening in each of just one single dwelling, in some dwelling, the huge peak, and another one has a huge branch. The up and downs are inevitably taking place. But if you take the entire accumulated the road curve, the peak road would be compensated each other. That's why, in a case of 100, much more, for example, 1,000, the maximum total electric power demand would be reduced very much. That's the key point. And this particular tendency would be observed much more significant in the case of maximum domestic hot water demand than the total electric power demand. That's quite an important result coming from TUDPS. Okay, let me summarize what TUDPS does, which was developed back in 2005. Yeah, it's the same information in a sense. And then the in essence most important submodel is the submodel composing the building dynamic calculation that deals with at what time each of the occupants turns on air conditioning system or turns off air conditioning system. As I mentioned before, we based on a Markov chain model in which we established two kinds of state transition probability functions, as you could see here. One is the probability transferring from off state to on state, which is denoted with blue curve like that, which is formed with what is called sigmoid function, which has as argument delta T, which implies the temperature difference between indoor group temperature and setting room air temperature. That's one thing. As a second, there is another state transition probability function, that is the probability transpiling from on state to off state, represented with our deep blue, this curve, right? That's the framework TUDPS presumed. Well, with respect to the first state transition probability function, this one, that might be acceptable. Yes, look at this, the sigmoid function. As I said, the argument presumes that temperature difference between indoor group temperature and setting room air temperature. That would be very acceptable, just because if this delta T argument increases, which implies that our thrusting F or indoor temperature, occupant, he or she, regularly feel hot. To this end, he regularly turns on air conditioning system, cooling system. That's why I said acceptable. The question is the second state transition probability function, this one, just because this presumes also the argument of delta T, which presumes that the temperature difference between outdoor temperature and setting room air temperature, which implies that with decreasing of this delta T, the turning of probability, air conditioning system turning of probability increases. The simple question arises here, whether this is really realistic or not. It would be questionable, and we questioned ourselves just because in a usual context, occupant, he or she does not perceive our outdoor temperature when staying in the room, of course. If it is a case, this assumption or this second, the state transition probability would not be very good. We have to improve the model itself. And we should ask ourselves, what is our major incentive, the trigger letting inhabitant turn off the air conditioning system on the spot? make sure that we did field survey and exploring on the field survey, correcting our precise data over 20 drawings. And let me share with some important results. Here you could see average number of air conditioning events taking place in a day, along with average total duration of air conditioning usage in a day. There are twofold to say. One thing is there is a positive correlation. That's one thing. As a second, the difference between the holiday and the weekday cannot be observed significant. That's the thing. So then, instead of whether it's a weekday or a holiday, we classified the entire 20 dwellings into 3 classifications based on another concept. That is, based on the frequency of our air conditioning usage, we divided those 20 into 3 groups, A, B, C. A means the high frequency, high reliance on air conditioning system. Group B are in moderate, Group C not so much. As long as C group is concerned, because of the low frequency, we are able to pay less attention on this group. From now on, we should be primarily concerned on Group A and Group B. This is Group A, and of course, this is Group B. And this is a result of state transition probability function for Group A and Group B around outdoor temperature, based on the original idea of TDPS. As long as the group is concerned, despite the scattering bit, there is negative correlation. With respect to Group A, concerning nighttime data, there is also observed negative correlation. That for the data coming from daytime, there is none of the sensitivity at all. That's crucially important about a feature if you talk about Group A. So then we have to pay attention of this classification, whether it's belonging Group A or Group B. After that, we explored a stringent statistical analysis based on p-value or the factor analysis and over-analysis and so forth. What factors are significantly effects on air conditioning turning off probability. And we got this cumulative probability function depending upon 2 layers of a classification, whether Group A or Group B, and whether the starting time or air conditioning usage event starting from 7 a.m. up to 11 a.m. and so forth. Anyway, based on this, and also based on this kind of very simple algorithm, we are able to establish our statistic model to how long one single event of our air conditioning continues after the inception of the turning on, based on this cumulative probability function. Yeah, and this is in a sense, the final result in which we validated by comparing with the real data, observation data. Well, please look at this one. This deals with average total duration of air conditioning usage taking place in a single day. The x-axis means the real data, whereas y-axis are simulation results. Yeah, there are 2 kinds. One is the old concept of TDPS that is denoted with a triangle, whereas the circle plot means the new idea that I have just explained. Obviously, the new one is outperforms than the old TDPS idea. So then our new idea this time, implemented this time, is much better than the old one. And this is also true for the case of the comparison of our average number of events taking place in a single day. We are able to confirm, also confirm that our new idea would be outperforming than the conventional TUDPS idea, the concept, just because the circle plot grows to the 45 of Rig line, which implies that the perfect positive correlation with the real data. And this is final slide. Here you could see probability density function versus number of events taking place in a single day. Again, our new concept explained this time outperforms than a conventional TUDPS as comparison with the real data. So then, the innovation this time, implemented this time, composes with instead of the two state transition probability functions, composing another two issues. One is state transition probability from off state to on state. That is common with the old conventional idea, but instead of another state transition probability function, we should base on cumulative probability functions coming from the field survey this time. Well, this is conclusive remark. And to realize the best design for the smart city, smart grid system, the prediction of the precise prediction of a utility demand with fine time resolution is crucially important. The idea. And to make sure that back in 2005 or 2006, we established the TUDPS, total utility demand prediction system, based on the several probabilistic submodels are dovetailed with conventional dynamic building simulation system in cooperation with weather data as input, of course, which is very powerful and shows that some significant are the advantage that UDPS has as compared with vis-a-vis the conventional framework. But it is not perfect. We have to elaborate to modify TUDPS to adjust the realistic the situation. As one of the examples, what I have presented, what I have shared with you, is that the renovation of one of the probabilistic model to deal with at what time each occupant turns on air conditioning system or turns off air conditioning system. Instead of the conventional two state transition probability functions, we were able to successfully establish new probabilistic idea. That's the whole content of my talk this time. Thank you very much for your careful attention. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for Professor Jun Tanimoto for the speech. Now we already have near ends of our keynote speaker sections. We would like to give the token appreciation for all of the presenter of the keynote speaker sections. So first, we want to give the certificate of appreciation to Professor Hideaki Ogaki as a keynote speaker in the third International Conference on Smart Cities, and also Professor Ruth Steiner, and also to Mrs. Evawani Elisa, PhD. And the last and not least, Professor Jun Tanimoto as the keynote speaker in the third International Conference on Smart City Innovations in conjunction with the 13th Regional Conference on Energy Engineering in Udayana Universities. Okay, I want to say thank you very much to all of the speakers. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that during this keynote speaker sessions, all of us have obtained fruitful knowledge and insights in this third International Conference on Smart Cities Innovations in conjunction with the 13th UNCED Regional Conference on Energy Engineering and the third International Conference on Dwelling Forms. We have learned a lot from the keynote sessions delivered by the amazing keynote speakers with various of titles from the electrifications, reclaiming cities after the COVID-19 pandemics, and related with the urban dwellings, and also about the utility peaks on the multiple dwellings. So once again, I want to say thank you very much for delivering such important materials so that all of us can deepen our knowledge about the design research. Furthermore, I would like to thank you for all of the participants who have joined this keynote sections from all over the world. I'm certain that every presenter had presents the applications of design research and also will give the valuable information to all of us for the educational research and further experiments that can be conducted in our own countries that probably will give the contributions to solve the related problems in our countries, our own countries. Even though the contribution is maybe small, but it's still valuable in the futures. I want to say thank you very much. My name is Kenny Lizers. I want to say thank you and good afternoon to all. I want to give this again to the organizers.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kenny Lisher. Thank you for moderating the session.
Thank
And
you.
appreciation
Terima
also
kasih.
goes to our speakers, our distinctive speakers, to Professor Ogaki, to Professor Ruth Steiner, who is still awake until this very late time, I'm sure, in Florida. And then to Mrs. Eva Wani Elisa also, and Prof. Jun Tanimoto. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please unmute your audio, and we have a big warm of applause for our moderator and speakers. Very loud. Okay, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, it is 11:41 from, okay, it was mute. So it is 11:42 now at Bali local time. We are 18 minutes earlier from the schedule. We would like to inform you that we will have 30 minutes break. So for those presenters who will present later on track session 2, please get ready and please make sure also that you will enter the room earlier. And the session will be held approximately for 120 minutes. We also kindly remind you to return to UNUT meeting room 41 at 14:35 for concluding remarks and closing. That's for now. Please have your time, 30 minutes, and we will see you again later on at 12:30. Thank you.